Okay, so that was everything you find on Blackboard. Just very briefly, again, just to summarize, you're going to find the syllabus and all the other documents, how to register for Mastering A&P, how to register for ProctorU, and so forth. All my PowerPoints is there for both lab and lecture, as well as the video, the lab and lecture, and also the video lectures for lab and lecture will be found there. All the highly recommended review questions as I talk to you about on how to go about doing those. Any announcements and emails will be found on there, whether you want to email me or I email you. Remember, you're going to use the Blackboard mail area. All the lab material that you need to retrieve and download and be able to submit is found there. All the discussion boards that you have to type in and talk to your classmates to are found there also. All my online quizzes and exams I showed you in the assessments folder. And like I said, the best place, the only place that you can contact me is over here in the inbox Blackboard mail. Okay? So the course objectives refer to the syllabus on what those are. There's also a copy of those that are found um, in the syllabus and other documents. Now the course schedule, I'm on page 19 now of the syllabus. Holidays, there's no tests or assignments that are taken or due on these dates. Basically, the only one we have is the Thanksgiving break, which is from November 23rd to November 26th this year. You may submit things during that time, but I'm not requiring anybody to be doing that. If you want to, you have some downtime on this break and you want to submit things, by all means, you could do that. Okay. The lecture and lab material, unfortunately, we won't be able to correlate very well with in A&P. It's not because of the way I do this course. It's just that if you take it in live with another teacher, it's pretty much the same thing. Neurology will begin a lecture while we're still doing muscles in lab. For instance, the neurology lecture is 5 chapters in the textbook, but neurology lab, there's only 2 that we have to do. So I'm sorry about that. It's just that I don't want you to, the skeletal system in lectures, you only need 1 week for that. But in lab, you're going to need 2 to 3 weeks to do that. So you don't want to be just learning all the bones and all the parts of the bones in lab in just 1 week. We're not this accelerated, 7-week course. So, it there's certain areas where you spend more time in lab and less time in lecture, and there's other times we're going to spend more time in lecture than we are with lab. It just doesn't fit that way. A&P2 tends to it tends to correlate well. In other words, we're doing the digestive system in lecture. We're going to do the digestive system in lab, usually the same week. It just works out that way a little bit better. Okay, but A&P1, it's difficult. The lab material, these subjects won't be tested in lecture, but they will in lab. Now, histology is kind of a weird one where it's going to be a little bit in lecture and lab. These are where the microscope slides are. So the histology theory, where things are located, that'll be tested in lecture and lab. But the actual images, the pictures of the microscope slides, that's lab material. It'll make more sense to you as we get closer over there. When we're dealing with the bones, the actual names of the bones and the parts of the bones, that'll be in lab, not lecture. Okay. How bones form, that's more about physiology. We'll do that in lecture. Similarly, with muscles, you're going to know the names of the muscles, like the pectoralis major, the deltoid muscle, or the biceps muscles. The names of the muscles will be in lab, but the physiology, the actual understanding of how a contraction occurs, that's going to be in lecture. So I just want to give you a heads up about that. Okay. You'll see the course schedule on page 20. It should be nicely color coded, and you get to see on what each week is. It's similar to the course calendar, except there it is on 1 page. And you get to see what it looks like in weekly form as opposed to monthly form. And it gives you some idea of when things are due in what weeks. Again, it's all color coded as well. Okay, and that's found on page 20. So the lecture schedule, you'll notice that there is 3 lecture exams and 1 final exam. They will always open on at midnight on certain days, and usually about 6 days later, they will close at 5 p.m. The bonus quiz, which I'll talk about later, that opens, it's similar to the lecture exams where it opens at midnight and then 6 days later, it closes at 5 p.m. Lecture quizzes, however, are a little bit different. They're only open for 48 hour time frames. We have 10 of those, okay? They will open 8 o'clock in the morning on one day, and then they close 8 o'clock in the morning 2 days later. Okay, so you only get 48 hours on that, and you'll see them depicted in the course calendar. The lab schedule, there's a number of things there also. There's lab reports. I have a total of 8 lab reports for you to do. They will open on certain days at midnight, and then they must be submitted, depending on what lab report it is, between 4 and 6 days. You'll see on the course calendar, some of them will be like 4 days, some will be 6 days. But they must be submitted by 8 o'clock on that due date. The practical exams, these are lab practical exams, and I'll talk about what those are. They open at midnight and they close 6 days later at 5 p.m. And we have a couple other odd kind of exams, something called the Quest. I'll talk about that later. That will open at midnight and will close 6 days later at 5 p.m. And then there's something that the department wants you to do in our fall schedules, or fall semesters. It's called the scientific method evaluation. It's 8 questions. It opens at midnight and closes pretty much not 5 o'clock, but just before midnight, 6 days later. Okay. You'll see the many video recorded lectures in my web links from my live lectures that I talked about. Utilize them as much as you could. Take notes and study from them. I explained to you to have 2 digital devices open for that. Revisit them whenever you want to reinforce the material. Okay. The way lecture and lab is broken down is that lecture is worth 75% of your grade, and 25% of your grade is laboratory. Now, there is a stipulation here. You have to have at least 60% or better in each one of these components. In other words, if you have an 82% in lecture and you have a 58% in lab, and your average now is about 75%, you still fail the course because your lab was 58%. It was less than 60%. So you got to have both the lecture and lab material above 60%, okay, even if your total score is above 70 for passing, okay? This is the numerical grade equivalents that we use at CCM, pretty straightforward. So the syllabus quiz that I want everybody to take, it's worth 1% of your grade. It's 10 multiple choice questions that is referring to the syllabus and this video lecture that I'm doing for you right now. Okay, we're on page 21. There's unlimited time to do it, but it must, the date that it closes will be this Saturday at 8 p.m. So you can take it as much as you want up until Saturday, but that's when it closes and that's when the due date is. Okay, all the answers are found in the syllabus and in the video lecture, and it's open well on day 1 if you're watching this on day number 1 on Wednesday, but it's due on this Saturday. Lecture tests, there's what we call 3 component exams. There's anywhere between 75 and 80 questions. You'll get 75 minutes to answer each one of these exams. They open, like I said, midnight on a certain day, and they will close 6 days later at 5 p.m. No lecture exam can be dropped, and there's no makeups. You have a week to do it. Find a time to do it. It only takes like an hour and 15 minutes to do it. There is one comprehensive final exam that the department actually creates. I am not concerned about it. I don't even see what it looks like until the very end. It doesn't matter. I see me as a coach, and I'm training my athletes to take on any kind of marathon. So I'm teaching you by the objectives of the lab and lecture, and you could take on any exam that's given to you if you're doing everything correctly that I'm doing over here. So I'm doing what I'm supposed to. It's just you trying to absorb all this material and making it retain in your brain. The final exam opens on a selected day. It is going to be 80 questions, 75 minutes to take it. You're not going to be able to make it up, and it obviously can't be dropped. Okay, both of these exams are going to be proctored by ProctorU, so make sure that you register for ProctorU prior to taking these. We do have lecture quizzes. We're on page 22 now. There are 10 lecture quizzes that go with the chapters. Sometimes I combine two chapters together, but there's 10 questions for each. You'll get 10 minutes for each one. I do drop the lowest graded lecture quiz. So if you miss one, that'll be the one that you drop. If you miss two, then that'll be one that you drop, but then you'll get a 0 for another one that goes into your grade. So the lecture quizzes are to gauge you so that you don't fall behind. I don't want you to ask me like, well, should I be done with this chapter or not? If I'm telling you that you should be able to do the lecture quiz at this date, you should be done with that material by that date. So it'll gauge you so that you don't fall behind. Watch all my video web links. The quizzes are based off my video lectures and my PowerPoints. Okay. Like I said, you only get 48 hours to do this. Once you hit begin, your 10 minutes starts then and it ends and you can't take it again. It starts 8 o'clock in the morning, and then 2 days later at 8 o'clock in the morning, it closes. So you got to do it within that 48-hour time frame. No lecture quiz can be made up, no exceptions, but you do drop the lowest lecture quiz. For the lecture quizzes only, I'm allowing you to use a 3x5 inch card, and you can write anything you want on it, okay? Front and back. Can't Xerox or have anything scanned on your on these cards over here. No extra pages can be attached to them. I do this even for my live classes. I want my students to be able to do that, to bring in a card if they want to. It encourages you to read and or watch my PowerPoints so that you could do that. Okay. It encourages you to collect your thoughts on highlights. You can only use one index card per lecture quiz. And like I said, you could only use these for your lecture quizzes. Do not use them for any other tests. If you do, it will be considered as cheating, and I'll have to bring it up to the higher authorities. Okay. I know this is difficult to monitor. Why? Because the lecture quizzes are not being proctored. So just be able to prepare yourself for the lecture exams, because the lecture exams are not going to be allowing you to have these. So be very mindful and, prepare yourself for those. Okay. We have one bonus quiz. Since it's very difficult to add any bonuses to my lecture exams, I'm not going to have any bonuses on the lecture exams for that reason. So I'm going to have one separate quiz set aside towards the end of the course, just prior to your final exam, and I'll have 60 questions. I'll give you 55 minutes to do it. You will have a 7-day time frame to take it, but you only take it in one sitting. It occurs, like I said, just before the final exam, and it will cover everything. Think of it as a mini final exam. The final exam covers everything from day one. This bonus quiz covers everything from day one. If you claim all 60 points, what I will do is that I will add 2 percentage points to each one of the component 3 lecture exams. So if you've got 76 on the first lecture exam, 77 on the next lecture exam, and then 78 on the third one, we're now going to make it 2 percentage points more for each one of those. Okay, so I corrected on that. It won't hurt your grade in any way. It can only help it. Okay, it's a good opportunity to also note your strengths and weaknesses before the final exam. This exam or this quiz, I'm going to allow you to take it 2 times, and I will get the best grade of the 2 to be recorded. Now, it's coming from a pool of questions of 60 questions out of probably about 300 questions. So there's a good chance, well, there's no chance. You will definitely have many different questions on the second time you take it. There might be a few that'll be the same, but many of them will be different. Okay, but it's still covering the same concepts that you need to make sure that you have under your belt for the final exam. So that's what I want to say about the bonus quiz, okay? And if you miss it during that time, you miss it. There's no makeups. The laboratory test, there's going to be three, what we call three lab practical exams. These are going to be fill in the blank or short answers. I'm going to give you 50 questions, you'll have 45 minutes to do each one. It opens on certain days at midnight and closes 6 days later. You can't drop a practical exam, and there's no makeups. Okay. This is going to be proctored by Proctor U. Okay. Um, just want to give you an idea of what these are. You're going to have a lot of pictures of bones and histology microscope slides and muscles and their dissected brains. You're going to have pictures of them. And I might point to a picture, a structure in a picture, and ask you, what is this, or what is the function of this, or what attaches to this. And you're going to it's not multiple choice. You're going to have to type in your answers. So that's what a practical exam is. It's practical because you're going to have a picture with each one of these. All right. So that's what that is. We also have something called Anatomy Lab Quest, and we're at the top of page 23 now. So this lab quest is really, the word quest isn't like a journey or anything. It's a hybrid of words quiz and test. And I come up with quest because I don't want you to get confused on, does this follow the same rules as a quiz? Does this follow the same rules as a test? It's different. So basically, it's gonna test you on anatomical and directional terms and actions and movements. I want you to know this material cold. I want you to know this very well before we get into the skeletal system of lab and the muscular system of lab. Okay, it's going to help you with all the terminology, the new words that you got to deal with bones and muscles. So I want you to have that under your belt, and I'll explain more about that as we get closer and closer to that. You'll have 50 questions, but historically they're easier and quicker to answer than the other lecture exams. Um, if I said to you, what color is a banana? You're going to say yellow. There isn't much thinking to it. It's going to be quick. So even though it's 50 questions, I'm only giving you 35 minutes because most students are done with this in 20 minutes. You don't need 50 minutes to do that. They're very quick and short. Again, you'll have a week to do this. It can't be made up or dropped. There's no exceptions to this. Okay. And this is going to be proctored by Proctor U. Then we have something called a scientific method evaluation or test. These are questions that are relating to lab experiment number 2 about the scientific method. Okay. It's a departmental test to evaluate the outcomes to make sure that students have hit those criteria. Okay. It'll be given within a separate Blackboard course shell. You'll get emails, and I'll give you reminders that we have this. It's going to be the week before Thanksgiving, just to give you a heads up. Okay. It'll only be 8 questions, multiple choice questions, and you'll get 10 minutes to do that. It's mandatory for you to do that. What I'm going to do is that you will get bonus points for doing it. So I need to make sure that students are doing this and doing their best on it. If you get all 8 questions correct, I will give you 8 bonus points. They'll be added to your lab reports. Okay. If you only get 5 correct, then you get 5 points added to your lab reports. I'll explain this as the dates get closer to that, but that's what I'm going to do is add points to your lab reports. If you don't do it, even though it's mandatory, you get 0 points. It's not going to hurt your grade. It can only help your grade. Okay. So this test can't be made up or dropped. There's no exceptions.